Let me ask you this. There are a few people more experienced than you in many fields, in literature and journalism and so on. What have you found to be the principal obstacle to a conscious search for spirituality? It seems to me that you see a world in which people reading books, seeing plays, whether current plays or plays written 500 years ago, recognize the dimension of spirituality. They know that it's there. They know that it's extremely important. And yet they resist any search for it. They think it's unmodish. They think it's anachronized. And certainly they aren't willing to talk about it. It strikes me as odd in the same way that it would be odd if people knew about the existence of sex, but for some reason never exerted themselves in such a way as to stimulate that appetite.
Well, I see exactly what you're asking, and one can only speak of one's own personal life here. I have found myself, it is one statement in the whole of the New Testament that rings true in the light of my own experience. It is that to be carnally minded is death, and to be spiritually minded is life and peace. And therefore, one of the agonies of living has been the eternal effort on the part of the collectivity in which I live.
To mortify the flesh.
Yes. You see, that's one thing. Then, of course, even more basic is this ego, which we have built into us, and which the overcoming of which is really the essence of life. I mean, it is to the degree to which you overcome it, the degree to which you eliminate this eternal dragging of every sort of thought and aspiration you have to the core of your ego, that you could be said to live spiritually. So pride, carnality, egotism, cupidity. In fact, you know, it's a funny thing, when you sit down to think this out, you arrive at sort of the case at our old friends, the 7 deadly sins.
Well, I know, but those are temptations. What I don't understand is this. I can imagine a swinging dinner party, by which I mean one at which the participants are intellectually curious, culturally diverse, in which you can bring up, let's say, an invention, some scientific discovery announced in that morning's paper having to do with splitting genes, or you can discover, or you can discuss the politics of Pakistan, or you can discuss the latest play or the latest fashion, or you can be curious about what it is that goes into the process of senility. You can talk about the pleasures that are taken from almost anything except the discovery of God. I really honestly don't understand, but I think you would agree it's true, that if you were in the middle of a dinner to say, I'd like to tell you about somebody who's dying from cancer, and in the course of his racking torture, he picked up the Bible, and in the course of several days, he discovered something that transported him into serene circumstances. I think conversation would stop, and people would think, oh, God, St. Mugg has spoken again. Let's not invite him next time around.
It's a funny thing.
Is that true?
Well, let me answer this with the utmost candor. That there have been times when, in such circumstances, I have felt that I ought to speak about God, and I haven't.
Yeah.
See? And
it's a cock-crowing business,
right.
isn't it?
But on the other hand, there have been circumstances, I'm happy to say, when I have. And it's never failed to work. That's what's so extraordinary.
But usually, and I've observed you, usually when you do it, it's when you are addressing 1,000 people, or 200 people, or 5,000, and they have to submit to your oratorical architecture because they have no alternative. And you can then make it work. But although you can, as I say, do it in formal circumstances, in informal circumstances, you haven't.
Well, I
regularly
have
done it. Well, you have because you've developed a certain audacity.
Yes, but I also discovered that far from being a kind of deflating social occasion, such as you mentioned, sitting around a dinner table, the strange thing is that in 99 cases out of 100, it's an enormous stimulant, and that in
99 cases, I don't doubt your figure because you've obviously experimented, but I have never experimented with it. I have been to 1,000 social occasions, at not one of which was the subject brought up.
But you didn't bring it. You could have brought it up.
No, I never brought it up.
No,
because of the sense of the social situation.
Yes, but you would have. But what I would like to think is that one day you will, and with greatly daring, and I will make a bet with you here now for a moderate sum of money, that you will be surprised by the degree to which all these worldly people, as they seem to be worldly people, or very much agnostic people and so on, how fascinated and attracted and interested they are by your proposition. Of course, it depends in some degree how you put it out. I mean, again, the very simple Christian, probably infinitely better Christian than I am, but who is a tremendously dogmatic person, we'll say Billy Graham, someone of that sort. This might be put in a way which would abash people. But I have discovered the opposite, that if you indicate in sincerity and truth that in the most wretched, inadequate way you have decided that there's absolutely no interest or purpose in life except relating yourself to God, and that in a Christian society there's only one way of doing that effectively, and that is through the incarnation, that the interest is quickened and that the hostility which you expect to meet with, in fact, you don't.
Well, this may be the one point on which we are going to disagree, or else you move in much more sanctified company than I do. The term, quotes, Christa, is a pejorative term as socially used, and in order to earn the reputation of being one, you have only to mention Christ, I would say, 3 times. Once per year might be permissible. Twice per year is tolerable. 3 times per year is overdoing it. You become then, a quotes, Christa, and people think of you as not quite focused on the important things.
Well, I agree that, of course, people with the judgments that they might express, but I have never succeeded in putting, in expressing the heart of the Christian message with faith, that it hasn't proved to be a stimulant rather than a depressant on conversation, and has been responded to sympathetically rather than with hostility. But all the people sitting at that table, like yourself, have been mesmerized by this terrible consensus.
Yeah.
That Christ is out, nobody's interested in Christ, he's a bore, etc., etc. But they've only been mesmerized, and you can break that mesmeric effect by simply refusing to accept it.
Well, but then but at least you grant that this is social pioneering.
Oh, it requires a certain effort. I quite agree, and I've often failed to do it. I've often joined in the rather shallow gossip and so on. That's,
but I've also read some of your speeches, and very, very often they are highly allusive in their references to. For instance, I remember a speech you were called in several years ago to substitute for President Johnson or somebody to speak to the newspaper editors in Washington. And it happened that I addressed them the next day, and they were still reeling from the impact of your performance. And so I rushed and grabbed your and read your speech. I think we published it, isn't it?
You did, yes.
Yeah. And it was only in the very last sentence or two that the spinal column of the whole speech became evident when you made a reference to the most brilliant light that ever shone in this world, you continue to believe, shone in Bethlehem.
Those tactics might be wrong, but they're not based on any lack of faith in what I'm trying to say.
No, I'm not saying they are.
No.
They're procedural. They're
yes,
procedural.
they're procedural.
They're tactical.
They're tactical. And I think that certainly at a gathering of that kind, I may have overdone it, you know.
Underdone it, you mean?
Well, overdone it in the sense of delaying as it were, the denouement, the unfolding of the denouement. But it would seem to me tactically necessary to lead up rather to it than to plunge into...
well, in speaking to the nation's newspaper editors, I suppose it would be a little bit like going to Plato's retreat and talking about monogamy.
Yes. Actually, there again, I mean, it was the response to that astonished me. Actually, after my memory of dealing with American editors, I was...
And encouraged you.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.